Hello, everybody. Welcome to our NITRO Studio workshop on the power of custom actions part 2. If you didn't join our first session, that's okay. We're going to be touching on some different topics and actually revisiting a few topics from the first session. Really want to focus in on the commonly used features of the custom actions that are going to give you the most power and most bang for your buck without having to get into developing web services and things like that. Anyway, so if you didn't see part 1, go ahead and look at it on our website. You can always go check it out anytime. We're going to put this one up on our website as well for a video library, and if you look at our NITRO workshops, you'll see all the previous ones we've done. We do these about once a month, and keep them going. So just to get started off, I think most folks have joined in at this point, so we're going to go ahead and get going. So my name is James or Stevo, as most of you might know. I've been working here at Crow Canyon Software for 8 years now, so almost a decade. And it's been wonderful. I've been seeing the company grow and develop this NITRO Studio tool and add a lot of features and power and ability for customers and businesses to really improve and streamline and make their business processes more efficient. Custom actions fits in very nicely with all of that. So I'm actually going to get out of the slideshow because there are some more slides I'm going to show at the end, a couple things about our functions, but I'll get out of that for now. The main things I want to get into, kind of feedback from the last session we got. Most people want to kind of learn a little bit more about our variables, custom actions, and query lists. And there's also some need to learn about the functions that we have. So there's a lot of functions that you can use in column mapping and in our condition builder that are maybe not described in our documentation, though they will be soon. There will be some more documentation we're releasing soon on some of the stuff. But I want to kind of dig into it and go into the functions if we have time towards the end of this workshop. But mainly the first part of the workshop, I'm calling this one an anatomy of a workflow. And I'm calling it a workflow. It's an anatomy of a business process. Let's say that it's an anatomy of a business process that we have actually in our contract management tool, which is one of our tools that we offer out of the box from Crow Canyon. But a lot of the functionality, a lot of especially this renewal process that we have in it, is designed through custom actions. So we're going to dig into how that was built, why we're doing things a certain way, sort of like forensic analysis of what is this action doing, why are we doing it the way we're doing it, and just get into that part of it in some detail and some depth. I will point out, as I do on the start of all these workshops, I will point out there's a questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. I encourage you to use it for questions, comments, concerns. If there's something I'm not explaining properly or something that's just you want to learn more about that you don't feel you have a good handle on, pop it into the questions box. I'm not going to call you out. I won't mention anyone by name. It's a private question. We'll see it and we can get it answered. So feel free to pop it into that box at any time you want. Any comments you have at any point in time, we'll be happy to get those addressed and any questions you have answered. So to kind of set the stage of what we're going to be talking about today, we have this contract renewal, contract management program that we saw out of the box. It's got contracts where you are looking for renewals. There might be a renewal cadence of a year, every 3 years, whatever the case might be. But there's a contract that some action needs to be taken at a certain point in time. And then there's some automation built in to manage that renewal process. That's where we're coming from here. So just kind of set the stage a little bit with the contract form. This is a form we designed for this contract management tool. We've got contract ID, which we'll reference later. We've got renewal option, which is helping to drive what that approval process is or what that renewal approval process looks like. So just a couple things, really just mainly those two elements, and I think expiration date is going to be involved as well. So really just taking a couple of elements from this contract tool, and we've added them into the submit for renewal process, and I'll walk through how that was designed and how that works today, and why we're doing it the way we're doing it. So at a certain point in time, you've got this contract that needs to be submitted for renewal, and some things need to happen. Now, on the face of it, that sounds really simple, right? Okay, just submit it for renewal. What's the big deal? Go say, okay, person over here decide if it needs to be renewed or not, make your decision, and you're good to go. Now, that does sound like a very simple process, and at the heart of it, it is what we're doing to a large degree. But there's a lot of complexity around that in the edge cases. What do you do if their renewal is not approved? What do you do if if there is no approval level for that contract, or it doesn't need to have an approval level? How do we differentiate those scenarios? How do we parse out those cases? And that's really what we're going to dig into a little bit in the process of this custom actions. How are we handling those edge cases? And this gives it, really gives it the level of flexibility we need to make it adaptable to any process. Because if we simply hard code those types of things into a tool, or if you're hard coding those types of things into your process, it makes it really difficult to change it down the road. So if a person switches out in a role, or your terms change and you can't renew 1-year contracts anymore, or can't renew 5-year contracts anymore, you have to change the process rather than going through and rebuilding a whole approval system, a whole approval process because of that one simple change. The way we've built this makes it really easy to adapt to those kinds of changes and adapt to that type of flexibility that companies will need to manage these types of processes. So without further ado, let's get into the actual build of this custom action submit for renewal, a custom action we've built. So, we've got this custom action that we're going through and checking a few things on that contract. Is it terminated or not? Is it pending approval already? So if it's already in the process, don't run this process. If the auto renewal is equal to false, then don't run this process. If the approval level is empty, we go through all this and kind of say, okay, is this contract eligible essentially for renewal based on these checks and balances? And of course, you can put in your own values and own checks and balances when you develop something on your own. So the first thing we do is we check we're going to just go out and do a couple checks, right? So this first check we're going to do is to go and see, are there any approval levels for this contract? And when I say approval levels, we've added in this table over here of approval levels. You can see you've got some for this 1-year contract, 2-year contract. So there are some approval levels here based on the type of renewal option. And if they, basically what we're saying is if we go and query this list and nothing comes back, then we just set the contract to be, renewed as without any kind of approval process around it. So to do that, we have this query list action. And what this is doing is it's going to look for a specific item. So this is going to be looking, when I say item versus item collection, what we're saying is we're going to bring back one piece of information, one data point from that list. And that one data point, we're going to look for that renewal option. And so what we're comparing is this renewal option here in the contract to the renewal option in the approval levels list. So you can see over here on the approval levels, we have that renewal option. That's a lookup ID. On the contract, I noted we had that. That's also a lookup to the same list, same lookup. And essentially what we're doing is we've got this, this placeholder here. Let me bring up my notepad because I actually parsed it out so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so we've got this lookup ID renewal option. So what is this doing? So that's probably the question in our minds. What are we actually trying to do here? So what we're saying is we're looking at the renewal option in the contract and saying, okay, get the ID number. So that's going to return a number. So that number is going to be the ID of that renewal option for that particular contract. And then we also have lookup ID here, which seems redundant at first, but what we're doing here, what the purpose of this second lookup ID over here is actually force the comparison of the lookup value in this renewal option field to the lookup value in this renewal option field. So we're forcing it to say, look for that number, whatever it might be, 1, 2, 3, 500, whatever it might be. Go check that number against here rather than a string of text. So if we simply had it where we didn't have this lookup ID as a part of it and just had this string here, we would return the number, which is 3, 4, whatever it might be. And what we're doing is saying, okay, does that renewal option contain that number? And what that means is that renewal option contain, does this string of text here contain that number? Which it might if it's a 3-year contract and we return the number 3, but that's not what we want. We want to compare the actual real lookup ID value, the real one. And the way to do that is to compare directly the ID value to the ID value. And that's what we're talking about here. We're first getting that lookup ID value from our renewal option. And then we're saying, okay, compare it to the lookup ID of the renewal option and make sure they're matching. And then we're checking to see if the value on that approval levels list is less than or equal to the value of the contract. So it's going to look at the values. Let's zoom over here. So we have the contract value field. So if the value of the contract is 7,000, it could pull back the first one and the second one if we're talking about this 1-year contract. But we're only going to pull back the first one. And this is, again, this is just because we're doing a quick check to make sure, are there any approval levels? Then once we determine if we get an item or if we don't get an item, what happens next is that we're taking the results of that query list action and we're taking that ID of that one item that we discovered because it's an item, and we're going to pass that into a variable. So we've defined this variable at this level. And don't worry about having all your variables predefined before you start your process. It's easy enough to go and add a new variable if you're like, oh, actually, I need to pass that to a variable that I can use later. It's easy enough to just, okay, pop out of the, save your work up to that point, go create your variable. Now that becomes available for that query list action to dump its data into it. So, if you don't have that created ahead of time, you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about that or laying that all out ahead of time. You can actually, as you build it and say, oh yeah, I need that approval, or I need that variable in there, you can go and add that variable. So again, we've mapped, and I just want to point out real quick, back to this variable, we're pre-populating or pre-setting that value of the task ID to 0. I'll show you why in just a minute, but that's important to note. We're purposely putting a number there. We don't have to. When we create a variable, you don't have to give it a value. You could assign a value later on as part of the process. So this can be blank, it's not required. But in this case, we left it, we did put a 0 there. So then again, let me come back in here. We're getting that one item. We're taking the ID of that one item and we're passing it into that task ID. So there should never be a 0. IDs in SharePoint are never 0. They're 1 and above, never 0. So if we get an item, if we get a value, we're going to pass it into task ID. And then that's important for this next action where we're saying approval is not required. So we've got this advanced condition, which I talked about on the last call, but I'll kind of revisit in some detail here. You have this, again, I took it out because this box is a little small for these purposes, but this is let's move this down. This is what we have in there. And I actually checked with my dev team. We don't really need to have all this parse field value. We could actually just have task ID value, which might make more sense. So we could just have it like this. But essentially what we're doing is taking that task ID value, which again, remember we set to 0 initially, and then we overrode whatever that 0 with an ID of that approval level. If it equals 0, and again, because we're taking this equals operator, and that's basically what this double comma represents, whatever this equals, whatever this operator is here, is what that double comma will represent. We're saying, does the task ID value equal 0? If the answer is yes, then it's going to go and mark that contract as active. We're going to add to the expiration date, and we're going to, and it's kind of interesting because we're setting the expiration date as a start date, which is really just the contract term start date. So that gives you some flexibility here. So you could actually decide, I don't want to if you don't want to override that start date with the expiration date, that's fine. You don't have to. We can take that part out. But essentially, that's all it's doing. It's saying, okay, the start date of the contract, which is the new term of that contract, is going to be equal to the expiration date because it's renewed. Approval wasn't required. It's auto-renewed, and the contract status remains as active. And then we're using this add function, which is one of our arithmetic functions. We have a number of those. I'll go through those in some detail. We have this add function, which is taking the expiration date and adding that renewal time span, which lives over on our renewal option list. So if I pop this open, you see we're getting that renewal time span from that renewal option record. So expiration date is adding to the renewal option time span, which is 365 in that case of the 1-year contract, and it's changing that value of the expiration date by 1 year. So that's all happening. So we've done that check. We checked, okay, are there approval levels for this contract? If yes, we're gonna do something else. If no, which is what this is checking, this is kind of the if no, do this. If yes, we're gonna continue on down the list here. So the next step in the process is essentially the same as the first one, but in this case, we're going to get the item collection. So it's the same idea. We got the same lookup ID value here, which again is looking at that renewal option looking ID, using that as our key to determine which approval levels we need for this contract. And it's got that value of less than, like I mentioned, if the contract value is 7,000, in this particular scenario, if the contract value is 7,000, what we're doing is we're going to pull these two as our item collection. If it's 12,000, then we'll pull 3 of them as our item collection. So again, it's item collection, so we're getting multiple items, and then so that's all we really need to do. We just need to get all those approval levels. Then when we go and create the tasks, the nice thing about using the item collection versus an item for the query list is when we go and create tasks like this, and you can use this for scenarios where like a help desk system, you want to create tasks based on a particular type of ticket coming in. Or if you're trying to build a project management system, you could say, okay, give me a task template similar to the approval levels kind of table that we're looking at, and say, okay, for all tasks for this type of project, go and create them. What you do is you get that item collection, which is stored in this particular query list action, and you get that item collection, and you run the update, or you create items essentially. We're adding list items here. So you're adding list items for every one of those items that were brought back from that item collection. So in this way, you can operate on all of those items that come back from that collection. So instead, you don't have to do it individually. You can go say all the ones that meet this criteria, bring them into this workflow, bring them into this process, and then take some action on them. And the action we're taking in this case is to create tasks in the approver task list. You can see this is the target list here. We're gonna get those approval levels. We're gonna create tasks in our approver task lists. And we got some functions and things that were references down here that are important. So the first step, we're gonna use a function called stringcat, or strcat, which is a string concatenation. Essentially, it's going to take whatever the arguments are in this parentheses and build a string of text. And that's really all it is. Approval task for, and then space, that's its actual space. You don't have to put quotations around it. You can just use the literal space between the commas. That works. And then you can have some dynamic value, which happens to be contract ID. So in this case, we're going to create an approval task for the contract ID, which again goes back to the contract we were looking at over here, this contract ID right here. Okay, so it's going to take that contract ID, say approval task for space contract ID. Then it's going to go through on every item that returned from that item collection, it's going to set some value. So it's going to create task 1 is going to get an approval level, and then that approver. So again, that's coming from our approval levels list. So we're getting the approval level name and populating that approval level on the approver task. We're getting the approver itself and mapping that to the assigned to field. We're getting the ID of the contract and making sure the approver task is related to that contract ID. And you can see here, this is without any kind of function or anything. That means we're directly pulling it from the list that we're running this custom action on. So we're directly getting the ID of the list item that this is running on, and we're directly getting the renewal option that this is running on. And we're popping that into our renewal option on the approver task list. We're also going to get the due hours. That'll come into play later. And then we're going to get the level. and then we're going to set the status as inactive. So it's a little funky in the sense that what we're doing is we're pre-creating all those approver tasks, and you may not design all your your process exactly the same way. This one's a little different because we're doing it this way, but I'll kind of show you how it works. Or I think it'll become more clear why we're doing it this way as we go through some of the other steps in this process. So we've gone all our approval levels based on that renewal option and the value of that contract. We've used that information to create approver tasks and mark them all as inactive. So the next step, and one of the important things I want to mention is if you're getting a collection of items, a lot of times, and if you need to do them in a certain order, like you do for this case, like you do for approval levels, it's good to have some numerical value or some way to sort it. And I'll show you, that'll become important in the next query list action here, because there is a sort option in that query list action. So you can see on our approval levels, we have level 1, level 2, level 3. So there's something sortable, something that we can use to decide which one is basically on top. And we do that by going into the, this next one's the query list for the get initial level task. And again, we're getting an item. So instead of a collection, we're going to get the first item. And again, when you do an item, it's always the first item that matches that criteria. So that's always going to be what the case is when you do an item lookup. If multiple items meet it, it's just going to take the first one. In this case, we're going to say, okay, in the approver task list, get me all the ones where the lookup ID of the contract. Again, we're forcing it to match up that ID field here to the ID field of this contract list. You can show me all the ones that are equaling inactive, or actually show me the first one that you see that says it's inactive. Show me the first one you see where the approval decision is empty. And then here's where we're deciding what that first one is. Sort by level. So like I said, we have that level as numerical value, 1, 2, 3. So that's allowing us to say, okay, sort by that and pull back the first one in that list. So obviously we create those approver tasks with level 1, 2, 3. There's 3 tasks that were created in our previous step here, this create tasks. So it's going to go and say, okay, show me the first one in that list, essentially. And then it's going to just get that information. And then we're going to submit it for approval, which is essentially saying, okay, we're going to query that get initial level task with the item that came back, and we're going to set some values on it. So that one item that came back, we're going to set it to active, and then we're going to use one of our, what I like to call one of our arithmetic functions here, where we're going to calc the business time. We're going to say, add up today plus the number of hours. So remember I mentioned the due hours that came over into our approver task list. So now we're going to update that due date and make it today plus that number of hours, which in this case is going to be, well, 3 days. I'm not sure why it's days instead of hours, but the format here is always going to be days, hours, minutes, and seconds, starting with the front. So this is actually going to say, instead of hours, it's going to be 3 days, but that's what's happening. So it's going to take today plus 3 days, which is the number we're getting from here, and adding it to the due date. So this is the calc business time. And actually business time, it means it's going to be 3 business days based on the business schedule you have in your SharePoint regional site settings. So if you're, in Arabic country that does Sunday through Thursday, your business days are going to be different than in the US where you're going to be Monday through Friday, or perhaps you just have an off schedule, or maybe every day is a business day. However you have it set in your settings for the SharePoint regional site settings, that's what we're looking at when we calculate business time. There's another business time calculation I'll show you in when we go through the functions that we have. And then at the end of all that, we're going to update the contract status and mark it as pending approval. And then we're getting the approval level from our get initial level task, the first one that I found. And then we're going to put that level as 1 in there as well. And that's important because they'll kind of inform the next step in the process. So I think the question in your minds is, okay, what happens next? Okay, we've gone through, we've created that approver task for level 1. Now what? If level 1 goes and approves it, what happens next? Well, we have an approver approve approve custom action on the approver task list. And I pop that up over here. Nope, not that one, this one over here, where we got the approve custom action. So this is going to be on that approver task list. So if I come over here, see if I have that approver task list. Yeah, here, approver tasks. I don't know if it'll show for me because it is based on who's logged in, whether the approve button will show or not. That's another configuration we've done on that custom action button within NITRO Forms. So there may not be one here, and I should check that before the workshop. I apologize for that, but I'm not seeing the approve button here, but there would be an approve button. Oh, I'm sorry, it's up here at the top. I'm seeing it now. So you get this approve button, and we'll throw an error if I'm not allowed to approve it. But you can also hide it from the ribbon if you want. That's all through the form settings. But essentially, you go hit approve, and it's going to take some action. But it's a little more complex than just marking it as approved, because now it's got to see, is there another level? There might be, and dynamically there could be up to 3 levels, or it might just be 1. So to do that, we've created this approve custom action, which does a few different things. Well, first of all, you can see it's got that check here, is the person who's doing this running this action, because custom actions, again, I've said this before, but I'll say again, the custom actions are always running in the context of the person who's logged in, whereas our workflow tool is running at a high level permission. So this, we can actually check to see, is the person running this action allowed to do it? So we're going to say, okay, the person who's running this action should be the person they assigned to. And if they're not, it's going to throw an error. And it's going to say task is already completed or not assigned to you. So it gives that check to make sure that the action you're running doesn't get run by someone who shouldn't be doing it. And then, so we're going to, the first step is going to update that approval decision, which is, what you might expect. We're going to just very simply, if the contract's not empty, it means there is a contract value. We're going to mark that approval decision as approved. And I think there's some comments that we're getting from a particular NITRO form we created for this. So you can actually present an input scenario for your users using a NITRO form or a default form within the context of the custom action. So that gives you a way to give them a way to add comments if they need to. Because usually the way we build these types of things is that this list is not editable in any way for anyone really. It's just through the custom action would you be able to update it. So if I come up with the edit form, it should be all, see, it's not letting me do anything. If I hit approve, I think it will let me because I am signed in as the assigned to account. And then what happens is it pops up the comments field right here. So there's that form that I was talking about, and then you can enter your comments. Those get added to that approval task, and they can be used elsewhere in your business process. All right. And then, like I said, we're also setting that approval decision to approved, and then we're going to take another step. Okay, what's next? We got to find out what is next in the query list. By using this query list, we're going to find out what the next approver task should be, if there should be one at all. So we're going to run this when the approval decision equals approved. That means we've run this action. We've decided to approve this task. We're going to go and get our item. And this is basically the same thing we were doing on the previous custom action where we were getting that initial approver task. If you remember back here, what we're doing is we're getting that initial approver task and we're using the same conditions, we're using this level. We're going to do the same thing over here, on approver task. Again, we're looking up that ID, we're making sure it's inactive because that next one in that list is going to be inactive. And then we're going to sort by level. So it's going to skip over the first one because that one's not inactive anymore. The first one's been made active, it's been approved, it's been decided, and that's the way it skips over that one because that doesn't meet the criteria anymore. So it's going to pull the next one in the list, which is going to be level 2 if it's there, and mark it as active. So again, it's going to basically do the same thing we were doing in that first custom action. The submit contract for next approver is going to be the same thing where we're getting the advanced condition next level ID. Again, we're using a variable here where next level ID is pre-populated as 0. So if that doesn't get changed. I think, let me just double check here, because I think, yeah, see, here it is. So get next approver task ID. So if nothing gets returned, that remains 0, and then that's it, process ends, because there is no next approver. And then there's going to be, we're going to update the contract renewal, which is, yeah, this is what happens if there is no next approver. All right, update contract renewal. There is no next approver. Now we're going to go and update that contract renewal, which is a custom action we're invoking from over here, which is this one over here, which is just a simple action. We're going to go update that contract renewal. Bada bing, bada boom, we're done. Set the approval level and set some values. Going to set the expiration date out X number of days or however long, and then it's marked as approved. All right. And then so that's that. So that's that check. We're again, that check, we're making sure, is there another approval level? Yes, no. Okay, no. Let's move on. Yeah, or yes, let's create it. So then we do the next level approval. So we're getting that next level where it's not equal. So you can see we changed our condition in the advanced condition to say, if this is not equal to 0, then we can run this piece of the workflow or piece of the process where it's going to do that, mark that approver task as active. It's going to calculate the business time, which is now, instead of today, it's going to be the modified, and it's going to add the number of hours based on that level 2, which is again coming from our approval levels, which I think I clicked off of at some point. Let's see, I think I have it. Yeah, over here. Right, so look at that due hours again. Okay, and then we're going to update the contract, which is basically going to say, okay, now the contract is on level 2. Again, we're checking, make sure, is that 0 or not? It's not 0. Okay, let's update the contract to say now we're on level 2, which is going to be your next level. So again, we're querying that next approver task. We're getting that approval level, querying the level of that task, which is now going to be 2 instead of 1. And we're updating that status on the contract itself. So it gives us a way to maintain and see on the contract throughout that approval process, where are we at in that process? Is it level 1, level 2, level 3? And then it'll once we've hit that point where there is no next approval task, it's going to mark it as approved. So then kind of, then repeat. So then the next level 2 goes in, hits approve, and then this process happens again. And then level 3, the process happens again. In that case, there's probably not going to be another level, and then it's going to, this condition will be met. There's no next level that equals 0. The value of this one is 0, so it matches the value of that side of the advanced condition, and it's it marks it as approved. So that's sort of that's the detail of that process of the renewal process. So hopefully you can take and apply some of those same concepts and some of those same ideas of using query lists and using variables and using some of these functions to map it to your own business process and make it more streamlined and easier for you to manage. And also with a lot of these placeholders, it adds a lot of dynamism to the process, where you can easily switch out and say, rather than hard coding who the approver should be at a certain point in time, now you just simply have a table of reference. You can go and change it out. So if you have processes like that, it makes it easy to go and change out and make it dynamic to what you want to do with that process. So you're not stuck in one set way of doing things. You make it easy to change it around. All right, so I'm going to dig into functions, but again, encourage you, if you have any questions or comments or how-tos or nothing, or think something didn't make a lot of sense to you that you want to dig into in some more detail, pop it into the questions box. Be happy to get that answered. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the functions side of things and where they can be used. And as you saw in these custom actions, they can be used in a couple places. There's some functions you can use here in the conditional area, A lot of the functions we're using in the either in value expressions as far as variables or as far as column mappings. So that's where a lot of these things are coming into play, is those column mappings and variables and that type of thing. So we created, or actually first, let me kind of show you the breakdown of how I've how we thought about the process. All right, let's see here. Let's see, it looks like I might have gotten a question. Hang on a second, let me pop this out. Okay, so just quick, so we did get a quick question. I'm going to dig into it before I get into these functions, the get all approval levels query list. So this get all approval levels query list is getting an item collection. So it's getting a group of items. So one, it could be one, but usually when you do a collection, you're intending to get more than one. And you're querying this approval levels list, which is that list from our admin area. But this is a list that any SharePoint list you could query. So you can make your own SharePoint list and table of criteria. And then we're using these Lookup ID, which again we're using to get the force the comparison of the Lookup ID on the renewal option in one list to the Lookup ID of that renewal option in the other list to make sure they're exactly the same. We're checking the contract value to get the items that match that. So we're using these two conditions, which can be expanded to many conditions. You could have as many as you want, or you can have one simple condition, or you can just get all the items from the approval levels and just everyone gets, all of them get the same approval levels throughout the process. And essentially that's what we're doing. So just getting that collection, and then we're going to take some action on it or use some data from that later on in our query list or in our custom action or business process. We got the information, now we're going to do something with it. So this is really just saying, show me all of these items from this approval levels list that meet the criteria I've put down here. All right, so I hope that's clear. If not, let me know. I can certainly dig into it again. Yeah, let's dig into these different groups of functions that we can that you can use in our tool. And like I said, not all of these are described in our documentation today, but we're going to be working on that. We are going to be releasing a FAQ that has a detailed breakdown of what these are. But I've also taken the opportunity to kind of break them out into different groups, which might help you understand or help you remember which ones are for which purposes. So there's other arithmetic functions, which are adding, calculating dates, product, which is a multiplication, subtraction. We don't have division for some reason. I think we'll have to figure out how to do that one. But we have adding, multiplication, and subtraction are the three main ones. And the ways you can do it, so there's an add function. Again, these all have parameters. Actually, let me back up a sec. All right, I'm going to get out of this right now. And I'll show you this other document that we have here, which is this is basically what's going to be put up in our query list. Sorry, query list. I got query list on the mind. This is what's going to be put up on our FAQs eventually, where you have this breakdown of all these different things that are happening. So if I scroll up to the top, you see we got some comments. It's a bit of a draft document, so excuse the comments on the side. But the essentially, again, add function where you can add a date, and it's really just simply saying, I'm going to take two numbers and put them together. And I think for a lot of these things, unless it's explicitly kind of outlined that it can take 3 or more parameters, it's really just limited to 2, which you can get around by using the variables and using a few other functions to kind of combine values together, so you can get down to just 2 values to compare. But it's also doing real simple, add 97 plus 3, 100. That's it. Due date, add again days, right? 2 days to a due date, which is, going to put it to the 4th. We're going to add $100 to a price, which happen to be, this happens to equal 1,000. We're going to add 100, it's going to be 1,100. Things like that are going to be pretty, it's pretty straightforward. And things like add months is specifically going to be for date columns, and it's going to add a number of months, and you just put the number of months you want to add to it there. We can see, okay, we're going to add that number of months. The calc date and calc business time are a little different because you're saying, okay, we're deciding what amount to add. So instead of adding some, this allows you to add the months and years, weeks, months, and years more easily. Days you can do through the add function, but weeks, months, and years you can't really. It's going to be a large number of, it'd be a large number for the days, like 365 for 1 year, or 720 for 2 years, or 730, whatever you put there. This makes it a little easier though, because you could say, okay, add 1 year and just be 1, and just say years, and it's going to add a year to the date. In this case, we're adding 5 months to our due date, or 5 days to our due date, and we're just moving it out. Yeah, so things like that. And then business time, like I mentioned a little earlier, is that we are getting this, like you said, you can see in this note over here, we got the regional settings. We're getting it from the regional settings of your SharePoint site. So that is going to take the business time. And so you want to add 3 days to something, but you don't want it to happen to fall on a Saturday or a Sunday. This allows you to get around that, where you can say, okay, we're adding 5 days to today, or to the due date or created date, or whatever it might be. And it's looking at 5 business days. So our output is not going to be December 7th. It's going to be December 9th, because that's 5 business days after today. And then, product and subtractor, again, pretty straightforward. We're just taking 2, let's see, products in here somewhere. Product, run the search, hunt and pack, I'll just search for it. Again, it's just gonna be very simple calculation. 25 times 5 is 125. Price times quantity is gonna be, say 1,200. Your price is 1,200, your quantity is 4, your output of this function is gonna be 4,800. Things like that, pretty straightforward. Subtract, same idea. It's going to be just taking the, and subtract, the order does matter. Add, product doesn't really matter, but the subtraction one does matter. It's going to take the second value and subtract it from the first value. So unless you expect to get a negative number, you want to make sure you have your larger value first. Or it could be a negative number, and that's fine, but you're just subtracting this value, the second one, from the first one. And then in the query list, there's a sum function where you can actually take, now let's say we wanted to, in our let's show, actually, I'm going to show you two real quick before I jump back. So there's a sum function here where you have the query list action name, and you sum either one or more values. So it could be one value, or it could be multiple 2 arguments, or 1. So if there's only 1 argument, that's when you're working on that item collection. So in our example of coming back here to this get approval levels, this is item collection. If I wanted to do a summation on this item collection, it would be query list, it'd be this QL, get all approval levels. It'd be like this. QL, get all approval levels, ## sum, and you do level. Let's make sure that's exactly what we did. Level, right? So what that's going to return in this particular case, what did I put that? Oh, in the notepad. In this particular case, what that's going to return is the number 6, because that's where we're adding. We're adding the number 1 plus number 2 plus number 3. So it's getting those numbers from that list. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in this scenario, but there are a lot of cases where that would make sense. You want to sum up all those items that you got from your collection. You want to give it a sum. We actually use that in our purchase request program. If any of you are using that, or if you look into the custom actions there, we're doing a sum on all of the purchase items. So we have a list of all those purchase items. We're going querying, getting a query of all those, and then we're doing a sum on all the quantity, the price, essentially the total cost, because we're doing a calculation on the quantity times the price, and then we got a total cost for that line item. Then we're going and adding up that total cost across all the line items, and that's essentially what you'd see here, what we could do here. Query list purchase items, and then sum the total cost or something like that. Cost. It's actually cost. Yeah, something like that. So that'll get you the sum of the total cost of all those line items that match that that were brought back from that query list item collection. So that's the QL sum, and then we do have some workflow specific ones. Let's just pop this open real quick. We do have some workflow specific ones, and we are trying to get them into our custom actions. They're different animals. The way they're built is a little different. I'm not going to talk about the workflow ones too much because everyone on here should have you guys should have the workflows too. But the idea, the focus of the webinar was going to be on custom actions. But anyway, so those are the ones you have for your adding, subtracting, calculating time, calculating business time, that kind of stuff. So you do all those to set your dates. We have those lookup functions. So I mentioned the lookup ID earlier, where we're basically forcing it to get that ID number from whatever the lookup ID value is. We can also parse the lookup value, which is same idea as we're kind of, well, it's a little different in that we're going to be getting the actual value of that lookup. Format value is the format value is one that's actually the opposite of the lookup ID, because the lookup ID is going to get the ID. The format value is actually going to get the value of whatever that lookup is. And I'll show you that in the in our document here. Like format value. So you can see here the format value. Lookup ID and SharePoint, usually they append. I don't know if this is the exact syntax, but something like 22 pound hash, whatever it might be. There's some string of text on top of those lookup values in SharePoint. And a lot of times when you're trying to do things like this with lookup values, SharePoint's going to give you the full string, which is going to be like this, maybe not quite usable. What the format value does is it actually takes and strips the additional stuff that SharePoint adds and just gives you the display value of that column, of that person or group. And so you can do that on lookups or person or group columns. And you can use more than 2 parameters. So you can look up multiple things and return multiple values from that. So lookup ID, like I said, does the reverse essentially, where it's going to get the number. So instead of the name, you see in lookup ID, what we're actually going to get is the value, the lookup ID, the 22. So you can do it kind of both ways, depending on what your purpose is and what you're trying to match up. Obviously, if you're matching up a single line of text column, which has a person's name in it, you're going to want to use format ID or format value to do, if you want to try to do some kind of comparison between the two. Otherwise, if you're trying to get a number, you can use that. If you're trying to, trying to compare to systems that use the same number, then you can use the lookup ID to make sure that that number is matching up exactly with what you're trying to see. The parse ones, let's see. Yeah, parse lookup value. It's used in field mappings and more so than in conditions or in other variable type scenarios. This is mostly just going to be used to get the number. Get some information. So in the lookup, so parse lookup will get you the name, and then parse user value. So lookup is going to be used. Parse lookup would be used on a lookup list, and parse user value be used on a user field. So it's kind of doing the same thing, but just on different types of SharePoint columns. And I didn't get from my team on exactly the results, but essentially it's going to give you some information about that user. We're going to be expanding this. So obviously this is a draft document. There's some things that aren't quite fully fleshed out on here that we're going to do in a little more, flesh out in more detail. Then we're going to put it up on our website on CoreCanyon.help. So this will be available from there. We're going to reference it from our manual so that you will have that reference to look up these functions when you need them.
James, did you see the questions? There's
yeah, I see there's a couple.
Oh.
Yeah, I ran over the get all approval act levels again. And then so just explaining we're going to have these functions available on our website on CoreCanyon.help.
Right.
And then I do see another question. I'll get back to that one in just a little bit.
Okay.
I just want to kind of get into these functions a little bit. So then there's ones where we're managing lookup values, and there's ones where we're, this one we're parsing and extracting functions. These are getting information from some value or some string. So these are used in certain scenarios. I didn't have time to put together examples for all these, and there's a lot of functions. So we're going to have details on how to use all these. We're going to have examples on how to use all these on our website. So you'll see, but parsing and extracting functions is basically we're taking a string or a group of data or a set of data and trying to get some information out of it. So like, for instance, the reg extract function, we're getting the, you got this regular expression in here where we're getting the case ID of this string and we're getting the value of 2. So that's one way to kind of more, get more granular about what you're getting out of that string, and do it in a way that's using regular expressions. And there's a few others on there as far as the extraction functions. They mentioned briefly we had some string functions like the split, string cat, and string line. So we talked about string concatenation, essentially. Whoops, going the wrong way. Then the string concatenation is going to take your arguments that you put into the function and put them together, and you can have any number in there, so that one's not limited to 1 or 2. So it's going to take different arguments and put them, kind of mash them together, concatenate them. Split would give you an option to split out. Is kind of a reverse of what string concatenation is doing. It's going to split out a string of text based on some separator, which could be a colon, semicolon, space, or whatever. And then there's going to be a string length, which is going to count the number of characters in your string. So you might need that for some purposes. There's metadata values. So metadata columns are handled a little differently than some of the others. So to input information into the metadata column, we have this metadata value function. So it's going to take whatever you put in that argument and take that value and put it into the metadata column. It gives you a way to use that metadata column in these business processes. Then we also have these standard placeholders where, today and me are also standard placeholders, where you can reference these and say, okay, you want to do something with a site collection. Whoops, excuse the typos. There are a couple of typos there, but it's site collection and site collection URL, web ID, and they are spelled correctly in the placeholder, by the way. It's just, that was me that messed them up. You get the web ID, web URL, things like that. You can use in placeholders, and you can put them into your functions and your string concatenations and your, whatever you might need to do. So that's a high level. We're gonna, I think when we put them up on the website, we're gonna have some kind of separation like this in some way where you can see which ones do which functions, help kind of understand which ones are what, which ones are which. So let's get into a couple of these questions, see if there's anything we can answer before, because then we're getting towards the end of our time here. So the question is about where we're going to see these, where we're going to have these as a reference. We're going to have this up on our website. We're going to expand out these examples and use cases in more detail and get that information up on our website so that you can see that. And then we had a question about creating a custom tracking ID. Okay, so we didn't talk about that in this call, but I can touch on it real quick if you'll allow me. We have a little bit of time left. So custom tracking ID, we can use that string concatenation function. So if you're building something out, you can do string concatenation. You can use a column placeholder. So like if you want to build it from something else, you do string title. We can do a space, and then we could do ID, and that's going to build out a a string of text that you can put into your ID field or into some other field that's going to be based on the title of whatever item you're working on and based on the ID of whatever item you're working on. Now, of course, you can put query list, you can put variables like var1 value, and then whatever you've put into that var1 value, whether it's hard coded that you've decided var1 is going to be X, var1 could always equal, in this case, why would you need a variable? You could do like contract. Let's see this one, string cat contract, do hyphen, and then you could do something like ID, and then I think there's a way you can get the year. I think you have to use a variable for that, like year # value. And I think for that year, you could do the year variable would be like today. That'd be I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I think there's a way you can get the year and put that into the string concatenation. I've actually seen this done in some scenarios where it's more of a scripting kind of scenario. In the purchase request solution specifically, we actually have that scripting. Execute a script to build that ID. But we can talk about that offline, and I can get into that with the individual who asked. Okay, so that pretty much covers what we can get today, squeeze into this 1 hour session. If you have any other questions, pop them into our box or shoot an email, and we'll get them answered. In the meantime, just a couple, tie up a couple loose ends here. We've got the next, it's just a generic slide about our business applications, NITRO Studio, et cetera, et cetera. Usually we have a slide about our next upcoming webinar, but I think we have not scheduled that yet. So I guess that's not in here. But if we go to our website, and we have some upcoming webinars. So some upcoming webinars, we're going to be talking about the purchasing and contract management. So we talked a little bit about contract management today. So you'll get more of the overall, interface, what people are going to see when they're using it day to day, and the value add for the out of the box tool on December 10th. And it's going to be talking about purchasing as well. Both of those tools heavily use these custom actions, and with the knowledge you're getting today, and that you can reference in this workshop that's going to be up on our website, you could go and potentially customize these on your own with that knowledge of what we're doing to make them work out of the box. We're also going to have a discussion about InfoPath and NITRO Studio, how that journey looks like going from InfoPath to NITRO Studio, and how we can help replace that outdated technology in your organization. They got a couple more coming up in January, so got a number of these leave requests. So we're going to talk about leave requests at the end of January, which is another tool we're building out, essentially using custom actions, and a lot of the techniques we talked about today we're leveraging for this leave request tool as well. So things like that. And then as far as workshops, I think we have one scheduled for. Yeah, we do. Okay, look at that. We got one scheduled for the end of January talking about workflows. So we're going to talk about, we're kind of talk about the workflows in more detail, kind of similar to what we're doing with custom actions, but we're going to go into the workflow side of things because there are some differences. There's some things you can do with workflows that you can't do with custom actions. And we'll kind of talk about those differences and different things that will, why workflows are a little bit different than the custom actions. And that about does it. So, hey, it looks like we hit our hour pretty much on the nose. I appreciate everyone joining today, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you very much, and take care.